Hi, I am Carolyn Gage, and I am a professional playwright living in the state of Maine in the US. And this year marks my 30th year in Al-Anon, which is a 12-step program for people who are not themselves addicts, but who have been profoundly affected by addicts in their lives, children, partners, parents. So having said that, today I am here and I'm interviewing Zach Blinston, and he is on the other side of the pond. What's your city?
Well, I'm from Manchester. You might see some clues behind me here. That's a Manchester United shirt from 1994 original. I'm originally from Manchester, but I moved just over 2 years ago to a lovely little town called Home Firth, which is in Yorkshire, in the sphere of influence of Huddersfield. And that's where I'm based at the moment. So a bit of a stark change for me, Carolyn. So I went from hearing police sirens and hearing drug deals outside my door to hearing sheep and dealing with pheasants.
Oh, that is wonderful. Well, the reason that I'm talking to Zach is that he is starting up a theater company, and he had put out a call for folks interested. And I was very interested because he was combining recovery with theater. And as I have said earlier to Zach, I think the recovery narrative, that narrative arc, when you're just drowning in addiction and your own brain is hijacked your whole life and your spirituality and everything, and you're just so lost. It's like trying to run a computer with a corrupted program. It just seems so hopeless. And the recovery movement, and I just in 30 years, I have seen people turn their entire lives completely around, and just the most amazing and dramatic transformations. And I'm kind of like, why is it so seldom represented, in the popular culture? Because it's such a message of hope, such a model for all kinds of things. And I'm autistic, by the way, so I just kind of start talking and we'll just forget about Zach. So I'm going to get back to Zach. Why don't you
That's fine.
talk?
I'm so happy to listen to you anyway, Carolyn. So and it gives me a chance to rest my vocal cords because they're very delicate, darling. I am a trained actor. And we do need to take care of our vocal cords, especially with our play coming up.
Well, why don't you talk about your journey that took you from Manchester, and from the sirens to the sheep. There's the title of your new biography, From the Sirens to the Sheep.
I
Um,
love it.
but yeah, tell us about the recovery journey and how it, with your theater journey.
Well, we've only got a short amount of time. I could tell you my whole story, which I'd love to share with you at some point. But the sort of bullet points of this, I was born in a town called Denton, which is a working class suburb of Manchester. I was brought up by two incredibly loving parents. One thing that I know is that I was loved. Um, in recovery, I've come to realize that just loving someone isn't enough. There needs to be actions, there needs to be consequences. And I was brought up around a lot of really interesting people. I've got more aunts and uncles who aren't my aunts and uncles than you can shake a stick at. Everyone is, and I'm still in touch with these people. My house was a party house. Manchester came out of the 80s under Thatcherite rule on its knees. The working classes were absolutely decimated by the Tory government of the 80s. And there was a post-industrial boom of music and art and literature that came out of places like Manchester and Liverpool and Glasgow, all these working class cities. My dad was a musician. We had a lot of music in the house. It was a party house. There was love there, definitely, but there was an awful lot of trauma. A lot of trauma. Both my parents had extremely traumatic upbringings and tried the very, very best to give myself and my younger sister Jodie a better upbringing than they had. And to some degree, they achieved that. However, I've come to learn about generational trauma. It gets passed on and on and on until somebody breaks the chain. And hopefully, I'm that person who's broke the chain, along with my sister, who is a great inspiration to me. We've been through an awful lot together, and our bond is extremely special to me. I've got some marvelous females in my life. My life is dominated by females. You were saying about a title for my autobiography. Most of my main females in my life, their name starts with an E. So my autobiography would probably called Too Many E's, which is also a euphemism for ecstasy, which I took a lot of in my youth. So we had an upbringing that was chaotic at times. There was recreational drug use, certainly alcohol use. I know it probably is in the US as well, but in the UK, alcohol is so entwined in our culture. I took a little sip of my drink now, which is Pepsi Max Cherry. Other brands are available, but even the glass that I'm using is a Carling glass, which is a brand of beer. Everything revolves around alcohol. When you commiserate, when somebody passes away or something bad happens, let's go to the pub. When you're celebrating, let's go to the pub. A day ending in a Y, let's go to the pub. It's raining, let's go to the pub. It's snowing, let's go to the pub. So it's really difficult actually to break away from alcohol, but I've managed to do that. I was talking there about my upbringing, and I don't wish to criticize my parents too much because I know how hard they've tried, and I love them both dearly. And I've got very complex relationships with both of them. I know they love me. They know I love them. With my children know that I love them, but they know that with that love comes stability, comes emotional support. It comes with material support, which, we really did struggle financially growing up. But I didn't know any different. Everyone in our area did. We had a brilliant community in Denton. Everyone clubbed together. We knew our next door neighbors really well, to the point that, Doris and John next door would pop round. And when I remember falling off my bike and hurting myself, I had to go to hospital. My neighbors took me. We could knock on any door and there would be that support. We're the most connected we've ever been, this society, in terms of, and I'm referencing Johan Hari when I say this, who's a great inspiration of mine.
Yeah.
And we're the most connected we've ever been. This being an example, you're in Maine, I'm in Hungerford, and we can connect like this. However, we're the most disconnected in other ways. There's the play that Mental Rebellion are putting on in September is called Pre-Loved, and it's based in a charity shop, and it's a symbol of the social erosion that's happened under the conservative rule in this country. It's terrible, really.
Can you stop for a second and tell us what Mental Rebellion is?
I certainly can. So Mental Rebellion is a community theatre company that I formed in 2020. Well, the idea of it came many years ago. Mental Rebellion, the title, the name of the theatre company really sums us up. We are mental rebels. It's a George Orwell quote. A dirty joke is a kind of mental rebellion. And it really works for me that we've got on our emblem is a fist and a brain. And that's us. So we started out, my day job, we always have to have something to pay the bills, us jobbing actors and directors and writers, is working for the UK's biggest non-for-profit organisation, working with people to help them with substance abuse. I didn't say actually, congratulations on your 30 years of Al-Anon. That's a huge achievement. I am a proud AA member, and AA and the 12-step program has transformed my life and continues to support me in my recovery, along with other things. But Mental Rebellion started as an idea even back when I was at drama school at the Royal Scottish Academy, now the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. I graduated in 2007. And I had the idea then that I wanted to do something different. It wasn't necessarily the idea, I didn't know I was an addict at that point. Everyone else did, I didn't. But I had the idea then that I would one day form a theatre company that was community driven, that had an ethos of a working class ethic. Our values run through everything we do, and they're like our fingerprints. We like to put them over everything we do. You may have spotted some of these in our dialogue. We have inclusivity, bravery, authenticity, commitment, and collaboration. For me, values are really important. I really try and make as many towards moves as I can. If you think about it in a physical way, when we make a decision, we either make a decision that moves us towards our values and beliefs or moves us away. And that's something that I've adopted. It's a school of thought that's called acceptance and commitment therapy. And I recommend anyone looking up Dr. Russ Harris, who is the sort of foremost practitioner in that field. So I haven't gone about my recovery in just a one-stop shop. AA was where I went first. My drinking, where do I start? My drinking was never normal. Even from being 14, I was hospitalized because while everyone was drinking alcohol pops like Smirnoff Ice, WKD, these sorts of drinks, you might not have them in the US, but people in the UK will know what I mean. I was using those as a mixer. I had an older cousin who I used to get to go in the shop for me and get a bottle of vodka. And I didn't see that as abnormal. It was hilarious the next day at school. I was renowned for being this, a part of my language, mad bastard. Zach's crazy, he'd do anything. You know, those inhibitions were lowered. I felt like I had a hole in my soul, a void that I needed to fill. And what had I noticed around me, coping mechanism wise? If something goes wrong, there's always something that can take that pain away. One of my earliest memories is of my mother walking back into our council house in Denton after finding my maternal grandmother, my nana, Lillian, God bless her, dead. She was dead on the toilet, not as in with her knickers down on the toilet. She was sat on top of the seat and she was slumped. She'd had a heart attack. I can't even begin to imagine finding your parent dead like that. She didn't know what to do. She walked back out of, my nana used to live right around the corner from us. My nana is my higher power. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But she came in the door, my mum, and her face was, I've never seen anyone so pale. And I saw her and she said to my dad, Nige, get me a diazepam, meaning a diazepam, which is a benzodiazepine. Mm. That to me, it really sticks in my mind that something really bad had gone wrong. And the way to solve that was by putting something external into your body to solve it. I saw it with alcohol as well. My parents, and I don't, as I said earlier, I really don't want this to sound critical of either of my parents. They had their own generational trauma. If you look at my family tree, it's littered with addiction. And I do think that although they've never found the gene, I do think that there is something genetic that makes us more predisposed to addiction. But then the biggest thing is the environment that we're brought up in and that we surround ourselves with, the people we mix with, the places we go, our opportunities in life, our values, how they change, and also personal choice. I got to the point in my drinking where I didn't really have a choice but to have a drink because I needed to take the shakes away. I've had quite an interesting life. I'm 37 now. I know I look a bit older. I've had a very long paper round. These bags could carry you a month's shopping, I'm sure. But I have also got 3 daughters, all of which who are beautiful, but like their father, quite rebellious. My middle daughter is called Emmeline, Emmiline, after Mrs. Pankhurst, who was a suffragette.
Indeed.
My youngest daughter is called Dusty, after Dusty Springfield. Me and my partner Ellis, God bless Ellis, by the way, she has been my rock. I don't know how she stayed with me throughout all this, but if Ellis, you do watch this, you're downstairs cleaning at the moment, but if you do watch this, I love you dearly, and you have been my rock, and I couldn't have done any of this without you. We've named our daughters after very strong females, and well, we're going to have to suffer with some of the consequences of that, I think. I've talked a lot about a lot of different things, and I hope you don't mind that I'm sort of jumping from one thing to the next, but one of my core values is authenticity, so it's all kind of just coming out. Thank you for this opportunity to have this chat.
Yeah, well, I love theater, and of course the recovery thing just really kind of lit up the board for me, but also your commitment to working class narratives. That is, I think my work is seldom done, which is disappointing, but it's usually lesbian centric or survivors of sexual abuse. But in recent years, I have really come to think that its identification with the working class is possibly the thing that makes it the most unproducible. And I actually have, I would say, I probably have 6 or 7 plays where the domestic worker is centered. And turns the whole narrative upside down and prevails or whatever. And I'm just thinking, people with servants aren't going to come see these shows. That's just not going to be comfortable for them. But I just that really struck me. And then you said you wanted to talk about access and the inaccessibility. That was huge for me because I'm somewhat on the gender nonconforming scale, and a lot of my work really puts lesbian butches front and center. Now, these are women that are usually have been treated like crap in community theaters, in academic theaters, and then definitely professional theaters. They're not even going to make second string chorus because they don't look like women. And the accessibility, an audience doesn't know that this is a community that exists because of the lack of representation. And so many of the lesbians of my generation felt they were the only one on the planet who looked like them, felt like them. So can you talk a little bit about your commitment to centering working class experience and how you're going to go about the issue of access, because it's a very narrow gate to get into theater, especially, when it's like a community activity. Nobody's getting paid, so it should feel good. And lots of times, gender nonconforming women of size, etc., community theater is not going to be a good experience for them. So they're going to go bowling instead on Thursday nights. So can you tell me something about your journey with that?
Well, the struggle to break down barriers of class and gain access to theatre and screen industry is a huge struggle. I felt it as an actor when I graduated from one of the foremost drama schools in Europe. you know, how I got there, I don't know, because you know, it was trying to get grants. You know, my mum and dad didn't have the money to pay for fees, so I did get some of my fees paid. I'm still paying an awful lot of money back. I don't know how much. I don't even look at the statement anymore, but it's a lot. It's in the tens of thousands. And I'm saddled with that debt now, and it's only really now that I've started my career in acting and theatre and screen, and that was, I mean, my alcoholism did hold me back. I remember going to an audition for Coronation Street, which is the longest running British soap. It's been going for donkey's years, and it's an institution. So especially if you're a Mancunian actor, Coronation Street is like, yes, you've made it. And I got down to the last two for the audition. I couldn't get through the door of Granada Studios without having had 3 double gin and tonics to settle my nerves. I had no, as much as my family supported me, they couldn't support me emotionally. They couldn't support me financially. And I was in a horrible situation where I was knocking on these doors and trying to get myself a foot on the ladder, and the doors were often closed because, firstly, being from a working class family, you know, there's a lot of upper and middle class actors who dumb down or play down and can do a Mancunian accent, no bother. And if they've got the stability, you know, they're going to prefer the guy who doesn't stink of gin, and the one who can go home and tell his mother all about his day, and have that moral support and that emotional support. There was a study done in 2020, and it's the National Statistics Labour Force Survey in the UK. And the figures are quite stark, and they paint a picture. 73% of all performers in the theatre industry that they surveyed were from a middle class background. Mm-hmm. That doesn't surprise me, because I mean, I'm very bullshit. I'll knock on doors, and especially in recovery, I've got to know who I am and what I'm about much more. And I don't mind pushing the envelope a bit and trying my hand. It's been hard to get into the theatre that we're performing in September, because we didn't have any previous work to show them. We could only say, well, this is us, this is what we do. Please let us in. So I've managed to get a small foot in the door, but it's been bloody hard, if I'm really honest. And the people that I'm communicating with, perhaps I shouldn't assume this, but they appear to be middle class. I'm not classist, by the way. I don't think that middle class people shouldn't be able to enjoy being part of the arts. I'm not an inverted snob. I don't think that, you know, although I carry my working class roots with a badge of honor, yeah, I do. I'm very proud to be from the class that I'm from, and having to have worked that bit harder to get where I am today. But it's about fairness to me, and it's like,
well, I think when you're talking about you're talking about this entry point, like, you know, especially in good on you for getting in a professional school. But I do think that's a class issue, not just with theater, but the arts. If you're coming from a working class background, or if you're from a family that's the working poor, if you manage to get into higher education, for God's sake, don't get a degree in the arts. That's just stupid. Did you work that hard to go to uni to, you know? Well, I mean, I think that theater is, well, yeah. I mean, I came from a middle class background, and then because I was doing out lesbian work, and I confronted my family about the abuse, I had a pretty rapid downward trajectory financially. but I also, when I had my first theater companies, if you were doing out lesbian work, it was a guarantee you were working class, because the middle class were closeted and they weren't going to show up for a lesbian theater company and so on.
Mm.
But I do think that's part of it, is like it's it's a roll of the dice if you're going to
Mm.
get degrees in theater or any of the arts. And the people that roll the dice financially, generally there's backup. It's like, well,
Yeah,
you know,
there's a, there's a,
I'm gonna just give it a shot for 10 years, and you know,
yeah.
if it works out, you know, but as you know, you're still paying
I,
off
I, I
your
I
loan.
didn't have that. I didn't have that safety net, and that's. I've managed to get some stability in my life with the job that I do, which I love doing. I facilitate groups, with people that are in recovery, and I feel like I've done an amazing job. I'm really proud of what I'm doing. But my passion is theatre. My passion is telling stories that otherwise would go unheard. In our play Pre-Love, we touch on the issues of homelessness. We touch on the issues of being an LGBTQ plus individual in a role of a police officer, and how that sort of juxtaposition works. We touch on all sorts of different issues, class being one of them. The idea for the play Pre-Loved came, it's set in a charity shop. It came from my time having to do community service in 2019. So this is kind of going back to when I was a primary school teacher. So when I left drama school, I had probably about a year where I was in and out, in and out, in and out, different bits of jobs. I was on TV in a daytime drama called Doctors, which was amazing. But then, you know, I found it really difficult because I didn't have the money to be going traveling down to London. I was begging, stealing, borrowing. I'm still paying back a lot of the debts for payday loans that I had to get trains to London and Newcastle. And you know, one time I had to go to Ipswich, where you might not know where that is, but it's quite away from Manchester. And all the time I had this, I call it the badger trap. You know, those big snares. That's what my alcoholism was to me. It was debilitating. But it was the only thing I had to take the pain away, to fill that void that I was speaking about earlier. You were touching on education. How do children from a working class background even aspire to be an actor? Well, for me, my parents were brought up in the 60s and 70s, and you had people, high profile actors, people like Albert Finney, Peter O'Toole, Ian McKellen, Patrick Stewart, Tom Courtney, all these brilliant role models, who'd come from working class backgrounds. Because at the time in the 60s, there was that ethos of social mobility and flexibility.
Mhm.
That soon changed, and there was a not a very good Labour government in the 70s. There was all sorts of strikes, and then in the 80s, under, and I can't even say her name without feeling quite nauseous, Margaret Thatcher, just brought this country to its knees. Absolutely brought this country to its knees. But at least she had an ideology. I don't agree with any of it, you know, privatizing everything. But the current administration that we've got, the Conservative Party, are doing exactly the same. What's the first thing to go off the curriculum when you're, what I hated when I was in education is I was teaching year 6 at one point, and they were all saying, well, we've got to think about what we can do to get them thinking about what career they want to do. And, you know, I was like, what do you mean what career they want to do? How they might not know yet. How are they going to know if they don't get exposed to these things? So a lot of the stuff that I did, even maths lessons, I tried to make interactive, and we would do it in the PE gym in the hall, and we'd do physical games and things. And drama was a huge part of what I did. But then you go to high school, some schools don't even do drama, because what's the first thing to go? The arts. Slash the arts.
Well, and also, I mean, here in the States, the arts are, I mean, what you could produce in high school, because of censorship and what the parents are going to think and all of that has always been fraught. And
Grease, doing the musical Grease would have been a bit controversial then, wouldn't it?
yeah, but I remember I was teaching in a high school in the 80s, and it was a public school, and the school began tracking these kids.
That's an
Probably
important distinction, but
they
sorry to
test them,
interrupt.
and the girls go to childcare. They learn to get pregnant early and take care of babies, as far as I could see. And the boys, they go to shop and they go to the car mechanics thing. The ones that they've just identified, these kids are not going to be college material, so we're going to track them into the trades. Or in case of the girls, it was sort of like just not to trivialize motherhood,
How to
but
be a housewife.
that was the job. And this is the 80s. I mean, the women's movement had been around for 2 decades. And I was appalled at the classism. And I was also wondering, are the parents aware that these decisions are made? And in your senior year, to decide you're going to go for the SATs, it's too late. You need to know, in the States, you're either college bound or you're not. And that's going to begin to determine what you're taking, how seriously you're taking it, and are you prepping for the tests. And I just was appalled because I was a middle class kid. I didn't encounter that. And so suddenly I'm in a public school and I'm like, wow, this is
So
these kids,
public
they don't
school
have a
means
chance, and they don't even know they don't have a chance. And it starts so early. But
so
yeah,
there's an important distinction there. In the UK, we would call a public school um a, a
right.
public school is a private school, and so places like Eton and Rugby are
Yeah.
public schools, which are for the elite, and then we have mainstream schools. But it's appalling, isn't it, that the first thing to go is the arts, because it's all right for little Johnny who's got mummy and daddy who can pay for his violin lessons or get a private acting tutor,
Yeah. Yeah.
and do these things. But it's just the inequality, and our councils, our local councils, their funding has been cut. So what do they prioritize? They certainly don't prioritize the arts. But what do we do about that? Do we stand by and watch, or do we get stuck in and try and make some noise about it? Because I'm doing the latter.
Well, and I
Um,
think also, I mean, the thing is, the arts are a real human need. And back in the day, before everything was digital, that's kind of what you did in the evening. You told stories. Everybody had a little shtick. Somebody could play the piano, or somebody would sing, and you made your own fun. It was like kind of camp or something. But
mm,
and now you just turn on the tube. And why would I want to do my own theatrical, or why do I want to hear you sing? Because I could hear Beyonce. I mean, and I feel like that there's a bit. I love local theater. And I've also found that I think if you've written a good play, Ava Le Gallienne would call it robust. And I remember the high school where I taught, they were doing South Pacific, hugely problematic for so many reasons, but
the
a
sailor
beautiful
suits.
store. Yeah, well, and the whole football team were the sailors, and everybody came. And I felt, this is a high school production. I felt like it did everything that the Broadway production would do in terms of putting across a good play, a solid play, anti-colonialism, racist, and all of that. But and I don't want to trivialize that, but I'm just wanting to say that sitting there, I was feeling like, what happens when you have extremely professional actors and a 6 or 7 figure budget? What happens? What's the difference between that and me watching the football team? And I know these kids, I know their stories. I'm happy for them. They're having a good time. And that becomes part of the theater experience. And I feel like we've kind of ceded all that territory to the quote professionals. But there
Mm,
are things that happen to you when you're watching your friends, and it's a good play, and you're watching your friends that and the real and the unreal begin to meld together, and they change and you change. And the story becomes accessible. You can take it in a way that you don't when you're seeing something extremely slick and very, very, very high production values. And
Mm.
yeah, but I have always felt that way, that community theater is enormously powerful. And in the States, and I'm in Maine, which is a tourist state, the theaters do a lot of the tried and true, the Mousetrap,
Yeah.
etc. And I get that these are tried and true, but yeah, and I wish the community, why aren't the community theaters doing
Yes.
something? They don't want to divide the
Yes.
community, they don't want to whatever, they want to rock the boat, and they definitely don't want to risk box office.
Oh, we can't have any expletives. We can't, we
Yeah.
can't do that. How many times can you see a production of Grease or of Cats, or even some of the straight plays? You just think, oh, come on, please have some originality. And it's all, Shakespeare doing rehashes of different plays. Wonderful. It's done. For me, what's important is saying something fresh and new. And it's not just about entertainment. We can get entertainment anywhere. Theatre should reflect back something that is going on in society and saying, you look at this. These are the lives of people that are being lived somewhere. And I often find that real life is stranger than fiction. Some of the things we put in our play Pre-Love are from real incidences. And we're reading through it and we're going, it's a bit far-fetched. And I say, no, that actually happened. But I make a very important distinction when we talk about our theatre company. In the UK, you would call the community stuff, usually you would call it AMDRAM, amateur dramatics.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing, I really support amateur dramatics, by the way. I'm a huge advocate. We work with a brilliant company who have helped us with props and helped us with support, called Huddersfield Thespians. They're wonderful. And I'm certainly not knocking what they do or what any of these groups do. It's the word amateur. Some of these productions are just as powerful as when you've paid, upwards of 50, 60 pounds to go and see a West End show. I resent the word amateur. There's nothing amateur about what we do. This is professional standard theatre, but without the funding, without the thrills around the edge. You can create anything. The wonderful book, The Empty Space by Peter Brook, begins by talking about an empty stage and then someone walks past it and you've got a piece of theatre. To me, it's that blank canvas. It's that.
Doing lesbian theater, I was in the bars and, wherever I could afford. And I remember, I think I was 10 years into my profession and I had a lot of theater companies because as a playwright, that was the only way I was going to see my work. And I remember it was almost a decade before I had the resources and the space where I could have a door that opened and closed on the set. And I would always comfort myself. I'd say, look, the greatest playwrights in the world wrote for bare stage, broad daylight, and I remember feeling the gender thing hugely when Tony Kushner's first play, the ceiling breaks and an angel drops down. Lesbian theater, and to my
Angels
knowledge,
in America.
Yeah, there's no
Wonderful.
lesbian theaters that I know in America today, in the whole country. Lots of gay ones, but not lesbian. And I just thought that play would still be waiting for production, if a woman had written it and it was about, lesbians. Can you imagine the tech and the insurance? The ceiling breaks every effing night and an angel flies. So you got to fly. You got to have this. Yeah, it was just like, no. And then again, I would just remind myself, Shakespeare, Aeschylus, Moliere, don't worry about it, Carolyn, don't worry about it. I could talk for days about the divisions and who gets to do theater and why and how, and what makes it successful. And
hopefully we're going to see some of your work in the UK next year.
That would be lovely.
53 jump.
52 pickup.
52.
I know you guys must not play that in the States. That is a children will say, hey, do you want to play 52 pickup? And then they throw the cards all over the room.
That's why I've got it. I wrote it wrong. So sorry. It's a brilliant piece, and I fully intend to
Do you
get
not
that.
play that game? Is that not a thing?
No,
And
no.
everybody in the States knows
52
what
card
52
pickup.
pickup is. It's a,
Oh yeah, I suppose you would. Yeah, I've just for me, it's just not. It's not twigged into my stupid alcoholic brain, I'm afraid, but it will
no,
now.
I just thought if that's a cultural thing, but I'm hoping people get it. And for people listening, this is a very short play that I did, and it's about suicide. And that exploring, it's very taboo to be angry towards somebody who's on their fifth or sixth attempt. Obviously, compassion's appropriate, but I've been there. My friend didn't complete until her ninth attempt, and by then there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of compassion fatigue, as they say. And then also she had hardened into a place of there was enormous loss, compounding loss daily in a situation like that. She was way beyond grief. The grief was so deeply buried and armored up that she wasn't feeling any losses, and she was having an orgy of losses. Actually, I think there was some kind of high, and like, if I can't have a successful life, I am going to be the grand prize winner of failure here. And so I wanted to explore breaking that deadlock. We all just stood back and watched it play out, knowing this will not end well. And so did she, and everybody felt helpless all the way around. And I wrote that play to explore, because when you have everybody who's lost somebody to suicide spends a lot of time with coulda, shoulda, woulda, and that was my coulda, shoulda, woulda play. And after I wrote it, I put all that to bed. I really healed from that experience, but it wouldn't let me go. I just kept, every day I kept thinking, oh, I could have said that. And as with so many things we find in recovery, if you can get to the feeling, if you can get to like you talk about the hole inside, and don't bother exploring that, just keep feeling it. Yeah, that's years of activity. Getting to the hole could take very short amount of time compared to the amount of time it takes to fill it, and yet we don't do that. Then we just coulda, shoulda, woulda forever. And yeah, that's what
it's interesting. I didn't think we were going to go there with suicide, but it's interesting, and I feel comfortable enough to talk to you about it. I came into recovery on the back of several failed suicide attempts. I was on the wrong side of a motorway bridge, ready to throw myself off. I remember clinging onto the metal, the cold metal, and the little flicks of paint that were coming off it, jabbing into my fingers. And I was wearing my nephew's socks. I was wearing a pair of boxer shorts and a Velvet Underground Andy Warhol t-shirt. And I was screaming. I was very intoxicated. I was very mentally ill. I didn't know that I was masking a mental health condition. I've since been diagnosed with bipolar. That's only come out after putting drink down and trying to rebuild my life. But I was screaming I think to my nana, to my higher power. I was screaming, help, help. Won't someone help me? Luckily, ironically, it was the landlord of the local pub who barred me, found me, came to my aid, and tried to talk me down. And then I was really aggressively dragged down from where I was by two burly police officers, which started a real resentment against, well, I'd already had a resentment against the state as it was. Margaret Thatcher used to use police officers against the miners as some sort of stormtroopers, and they really roughed me up. I was battered and bruised, threw me in the back of an ambulance, back of a police car. I didn't get an ambulance, even though it was a mental health crisis. And they took me to the local general hospital in Tameside. And within a couple of hours, I was released from the mental health unit. It's alcohol. It's fine. Alcohol wasn't my problem. But that was just the symptom. Cocaine wasn't my problem. Ecstasy wasn't my problem. My problem was childhood trauma. My problem was crippling self-doubt. My problem was anxiety, depression, bipolar, ADHD, all these things that lurked beneath the surface, which people tend to generally just mask and cover up, and especially alcohol, but other substances as well. And I tell the people I work with, alcohol's not your problem, cocaine's not your problem. You need to find what is that thing that lurks deep within you that you've never
and
quite.
This is to me where the idea of a theater company that's doing a lot of recovery stories is so important. And honestly, the environmental situation in the United States is insane. I mean, everybody's weather is changing, everything's on fire, it's flooding, and
Oh no, global warming
and
doesn't exist. What are you talking about?
It's like we're a dry drunk culture. Or a wet drunk culture. Either way, it's the same disease. It's a denial, it's an arrogance, it's a lack of perspective, it's a lack of emotional sobriety, it's all those things. And
Lack
I
of
feel like
spirituality.
there's the story of the individual with their demons, but I feel like that's just a microcosm of, as a culture, we're not paying the bills and we're being evicted. And that to me is like, it's an individual story, but it's also a global story. And I think that model is so important. Like, if we can figure out what it takes for an individual to get sober, we can figure out what it takes to collectively. Like, I love being in the company of people in recovery. We speak a different language. We absolutely, I confront you about something, you know what's happening by the first sentence. You're like, uh-oh, I'm being confronted. You also know, what you need to do, which is not like, shut the F up, and then if you did it, oh God, I got to own this. But we do it, and I feel so safe around people in recovery because we speak the same language, a language of boundaries, a language of accountability. And this is not what's happening in governments. Oh my God, my country, one of our leading candidates is patently mentally ill.
What, just one of them?
Sociopathic. I mean, it's like he's got 91 indictments. It's who would do that? Drunks.
These people, people that are addicted to power and corruption and greed.
Yeah.
There's no, in the world, there's no fair distribution of wealth. The people at the top are clinging onto it, and the people at the bottom lose out.
Well, I want to.
And then the people in the middle are like,
I get it. So I see we're kind of starting to round into the hour, and I didn't want to miss the other piece you have coming up after I love the title, Pre-Love. That's I think that's really good. But you have another evening of theater coming up called A Quiet Place. And I know when you were talking to us about your vision, you shared a song with us, and it was about in an urban culture and bombarded by all kinds of media and everything. The singer was singing about the need for a quiet place. And I wonder if you just share with us because we're also talking about this global thing, and I think part of the rapid acceleration, we don't even do seasons anymore. It's like 40-hour week, it's just, I feel like it's intentional that you can't get a quiet place, so that you won't notice what's going on. Just keep the party rolling. But anyway, if you talk a little bit about the quiet place.
Yeah, so we've got in development. When I put the advert out that you picked up on, which I'm so delighted that you did, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for having me on having this interview with me and making me feel so welcome. I think you and I could talk for probably about 17 days solid. But at least I've learned now most of the time to shut up and actually actively listen. Certainly wouldn't be doing that when I was in active addiction. We do speak a different language. So A Quiet Place is in development. When I put the advert out, I did not expect to receive so much feedback from playwrights wanting to get involved. I think I counted 107 replies, and we've had 2 very successful writers' forums, both of which you attended, Carolyn. And I think you'll agree they've been extremely productive, exciting, and there's like a buzz going on. So my concept is that a quiet place can be anywhere. It can be a multi-faith prayer room in a hospital. It can be an AA meeting. It could be a spot under a tree, anywhere. I encourage our playwrights to use whatever stimuli they've got around the music. The song "A Quiet Place" by Garnet Mims is one of my all-time favorites. I was brought up with my dad was a punk and into lots of punk music, and my mum was more of a mod and into Northern soul. And the music of Detroit came to Denton. And it was a crossover. We were working in the factories, they were working in the car plants. There was a lot of similarities there, and a cross sharing of culture. But I'd never come across this. And one of my favorite poets, John Cooper Clarke, Dr. John Cooper Clarke, look him up. He's fantastic. He's a poet, a performance poet. He on Desert Island Discs said that he would take this song with him, and it's been my favorite ever since. So that kind of sparked me off to think, how could we do this? And I had so many different writers interested that I thought, okay, we will do it as almost like a mosaic of different short pieces of probably no longer than 10 minutes. Obviously, I'd love for your piece to be involved in that. And for your work to get on the stage again here in the UK. And because I think it's what you've done for lesbian theatre is absolutely groundbreaking, and the drum still needs to be banged for that platform. There's so many different platforms, but I kind of want to amalgamate them. We have got this ethos of doing working class theatre for the people, by the people. We're going to cover all sorts of issues, from LGBTQ plus issues to race and class, trauma. We're going to look at all sorts of things. So it's really exciting. I'm hoping that we're going to do it this time next year in Recovery Month. So it's really good that we've done this interview today, because today is the start of Recovery Month. September.
I did. So I did not know that.
It's day 1 of Recovery Month.
I hope that you will stream your productions so that people can see them, even though
I don't think on this occasion we will, but I think for The Quiet Place we will certainly look to do that.
Yeah, that's what I think that would be, if you can, you have to bake it in. If you're up and running and then you decide to do it, it's usually too late. I feel like if you're going to do that, it needs to be
build it in.
Yeah. But I had good experiences during the pandemic with Zoom readings, and I found, I found that in some ways, because the focus is so, there's no props, furniture, action, in some ways, and also live theater, you're not right in people's faces. I thought there were some qualities that came across in Zoom readings that wouldn't necessarily come across, in the production. So, but I'm really excited about that. And again, I think, to me, one of the reasons that maybe recovery is difficult to put on the stage is that, the bridge, you're seeing on the bridge, that's very cinematic. Dramatic.
I started writing as a screenplay. I've done about 2 pages, which is me all over procrastination. But I don't think I was ready to kind of peel that plaster off yet. When you touched on suicide recently, I've been trying to deal with not a very nice thing that happened when I was a young man. I actually took my mother down from hanging. She survived, but that was an horrendous thing to happen, and still sort of plagues me a little bit. I don't really talk about it, but I think that one of my qualities is being open-minded as well, and being vulnerable, not being afraid to be vulnerable. So we need to talk about these things, and with us talking about them, we can write about them and we can perform about them, because there's no hiding place for this stuff. This is life. this is real life. And if we're going to be a reflection of society and we're going to reflect something back and say, hey, this is what's going on, then I think it's urgent that this is on the
Well, and I
stage
see that
and
just
accessible.
your theater is going to give people that quiet place, because it's a place where you sit back and you watch this thing that if you're caught up in it, you can't see it, but looking at it, you can see it. And it's like, oh, and that's what I was going to say, is that moment, I mean, the dramatic moment of your recovery is probably almost nowhere near as cinematic as the bridge. That's very dramatic. That's very accessible. Wow. Those moments when your life changes, they're quiet. They're just maybe the moment you didn't say fuck you, and you're like, what happens if I don't say that? And then a new thought comes. It's like, but I think that is dramatic, and I think it's important to put that on the stage. But it's a little bit of a trick, because we like the car chases. Everybody likes the car chase, and everybody loves the romance. But the real love, it shows up in restraint. It shows up in humility, and putting those on the stage. Really great actors can do it, those moments. But that's, I feel like that quiet place is so needed, and it just gets railroaded by the car chase, and our addiction to, and I say that in theater a lot, like there's movement and there's emotion, and people confuse the two. You can have a lot of motion going on, nobody's feeling a damn thing, or they're being manipulated.
Well, we use with my actors, I use Meisner technique, which Sanford Meisner is an American practitioner who is one of my idols. The way that he trained actors to be impulsive and spark off one another, and basically learn the lines rote, and then the play is the ping pong of what you get back from each actor. So hopefully that will be reflected in our work. I'm so excited to work with yourself and the other playwrights on this. So watch this space, this quiet space. I think we need to do this like weekly. We could have like the Carolyn and Zach show.
I feel very flattered. We got about 3 more minutes, and so this is it. You've got something. You have something else. Yeah, tell us about that T-shirt.
My favorite film and one of my favorite books. So this is an image that really sums up mental rebellion and what we're going to do. It's two fingers up to the establishment. It's working class people taking ownership of their lives. One of my idols is the film director Ken Loach, who I was very lucky to meet once at a football match in Manchester. And I also auditioned for him. As soon as he heard that I'd been to drama school, he really wasn't interested, but there we go. I should have lied to him. I was working at Asda at the time, which is a like Walmart, and I never got the part anyway, but I'm glad that my life has gone the path it's gone down. But Kes is, you must watch the film, people who are listening to this, or read the book, Kestrel for a Knave by Barry Hines. It's a beautiful story, sad, and it's about Billy Casper, who is a working class lad from Barnsley, which is in Yorkshire, not far from where I am now in Holmfirth. Watch it and read the book. It's brilliant. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And like I say, I think we could probably go on for another 16, 17 hours. So let's keep in contact. But I love what you're doing. I love the visceral nature of your writing and your work. And I want to give a slice of that to our UK audiences. So watch this space for September 2024, this quiet space. And maybe we should end on a song.
No, I'm going to just go ahead and end it, but hang in there. We'll debrief, but I'm going to end now. Thank you all for watching. And this is Mental Rebellion. And what town is it located in?
In Huddersfield in Yorkshire.
Huddersfield in Yorkshire. And this is Zach Blinston. And yes, keep an eye on this space. All right, I'm going to end the tape now.